Hey guys, this is Josh with Budget Mechanic. Today we're back with a 2006 Honda Accord with the 2.4 VTEC. And on this engine, Honda has been nice enough to put the starter underneath part of the intake. So there's going to be an extra step of removing that intake to get to the starter to replace it. One thing to keep in mind with this job, you have to remove the throttle body, and oftentimes when you do that, you ruin the gasket. So it might be a good idea to go pick up a throttle body gasket before you start the job, just in case you break it. And other than that, it's fairly straightforward. Looking under the hood, our starter is located underneath this part of the intake, or the plenum. So we're going to have to remove this as well as the throttle body. So let's get started. Pop the negative terminal off the battery. Before I forget, two 10mm nuts. Starting on this side, we're going to take this air hose off. Hose clamp, this hose with a little squeeze clamp. Down here we have a tiny little bolt on this hose clamp, 7/32 socket. Then I'm going to use a flat head to kind of pry this hose away from the throttle body, pry this hose off the side and away from the airbox. This just presses out. There's a little squeeze clamp, and then these two fittings fit right in the air hose. There's a couple small coolant hoses that run through the throttle body, which you're going to have to remove. So you might want to put a little drain pan underneath just to catch some of that extra spill. Next, we're going to pull this throttle body off and away. Plug on the back. Then we've got multiple hoses. So for this coolant hose, it wants to keep draining out, so I'm just going to put a little clip on the end just to kind of keep it from leaking all over me while I'm working. Next hose. Down here we have a 10mm bolt holding a bracket for this wire. I'm just going to stick the bolt right back in actually so I don't lose it or lose its place. Okay, then we've got another 10mm bolt here. So that bolt comes out, and then we're going to unclip this wire. Push the tab, pull it out. That'll free this up so I remember where it goes. All right, now we have the four 12mm bolts and nuts that hold the throttle body on. I'm just going to remove those. So this gasket's pretty sticky, so I'm actually going to whack it with this dead blow hammer. You don't want to hit it with a metal hammer. If you don't have one of these, maybe just use a piece of wood in between the hammer so you don't crack the aluminum. But I'm just going to give it a little whack up and out. And unfortunately, I ruined the gasket because it was so sticky. So just a note on these electronically controlled throttle bodies, you never want to stick your finger in there and move that butterfly, even to clean it. You can actually break these really easily and or mess up the computer connection. So you don't want to do that. If you want to clean this throttle body, you got to do it with another person pushing on the gas pedal so that it opens electronically, and then you can clean it. I'm going to stuff a rag in my intake just in case I drop a nut or something. Now I'm going to take this 10mm bolt off this bracket. I'm going to free this one up just to get it out of my way. I've got a couple little hoses I'm going to pull out of their clips here. Oh, this one's all old and plastic and just snapped right off. A little vacuum hose here. You got to be really careful with the old small ones because they just love to tear and crack. So I'm going to make sure it's fully broken loose from its little nipple. Really gently work it off. Okay, so we're going to break loose this plug here. And then right below it, there's this black support that goes all the way down underneath the intake and bolts to the transmission. Looks like a 12mm bolt down there, and that's the brace for to hold up the intake. We're going to break that loose as well. Okay, so what I'm able to do is, it's just, this plug is mounted to a little thin metal tab, so I'm actually able to bend it out so I can kind of see it. And then on the back side, on the right, there's a tab you press down, and it allows you to slide it off. There's just a tab on the left, you push down, and then pull it out. There's actually a zip tie holding it underneath where you can't see, so you follow the wire back and you want to get some pliers in there and break it loose from its little bracket. 12mm socket goes right on this bolt right here at the bottom of that support bracket. That's nice and tight. There we go. Now we're free to take these 5 plenum bolts off, and this thing's gonna pull right out. So I'm just gonna kind of crack them all loose, not pull them all the way out, just so that I have even loosening across the surface. Last one. I'm just going to remove this so it doesn't get damaged. All right, with the plenum off, we can actually see the starter now sitting in here. To get to this, we're just going to have to remove these little wire clips, the positive cable, and then our bolts for the starter, one here and one back there. Starting on the left, temperature sensor clip, little tab on the back, tab here, pulls right off. This guy, I have a tab on the bottom that I'm going to push down, and it just slides it off of that bracket so I have access here. So the one trick with this positive lead is it's sitting right under this coolant pipe, and so I can't really get a socket or a wrench on it. So what I'm going to do is loosen the starter, pull it out of place so that I can get a socket on that 12mm bolt. First up is this 17mm bolt. I anticipate it's going to be quite tight, so I'm going to use a larger wrench. There it is. So the second bolt is kind of a weird one. It's a bolt that's long, sticks all the way out to here, and has a 14mm head on it. There you go. Now the starter just pops right out, and I can spin it and get to this positive lead. Comes right off, and the starter comes out. This is also a good time to check your flywheel teeth. So this is right where the starter goes in and it engages your flywheel. And you want to just check the teeth of this guy, making sure they're not super damaged, which could be another reason for it to not engage and start properly. These are a little worn, but there's no major cracking or chipping or big burrs on the teeth. So I think we're good to go there. All right, let's check our parts against the new one. Here's our old guy, checking that my bolt spacing is the same, that my attachments are in the same location, and it looks all good to me. Nothing I have to move over to the new starter, so I can just go ahead and throw this in. Okay, I'm gonna put this extended bolt in its place, and then I'm gonna work the starter into position, and remembering before I line it up and tighten it, I'm going to put this positive terminal on while I can still access it. Okay, now I can slide the starter up and line up this first bolt in the back. So because the threads on these bolts are so long and it's kind of awkward, I'm just using this universal joint on an extension so that I can just thread it in faster. Okay, bolt number 2. Now I can tighten these guys up. And the rear, you just want to snug it. And I can reattach all of these clips that I did before. Right here. There. Coolant sensor. All right. First I'm going to make sure this gasket's totally clean. No grit or dirt on the mating surfaces, both sides. So the tricky part of this is that bracket on the bottom. You have to sneak it on the inside of the coolant hose in order to get in there. There we go. This guy right here, you want to make sure that's free. Make sure you didn't trap anything over here. So I'm going to put a couple nuts in here just to hold everything in place. I'll throw the rest of these plenum bolts on. I'm going to tighten these 5 bolts down evenly, starting in the middle and working my way to the outside. There we go. So while we're down here, I'm going to reconnect this plug and remount it to this little metal tab sticking out right here. So I'm going to throw the hoses on the left side. Clip. You definitely want to check your new gasket against the old one just to make sure all the holes are in the right place and that it has the right holes. So in taking this old gasket all the way off, I'm probably going to get some residual like that. So you can just scrape that off with a clean blade. So I got my surfaces all cleaned up, and I'm going to put this gasket on here. Slide the throttle body in place. Again, making sure no hoses or wires get trapped between the surfaces. Got the wire plug in the back. Got the closer of these coolant hoses. Okay, I'm going to reattach this wiring harness bracket. Gotta make sure this aluminum tab goes in the right slot on the plastic. Gonna plug it back in. Same deal here, a wire bracket. And one more bracket here. So then we can reconnect our hoses, top of the throttle body, as well as on top of the engine. Okay, so I'm gonna push it onto the air box first, and then onto the throttle body. I'm gonna spin this clamp around so that it's a little more accessible. I'm gonna plug in this big fitting in the back, just 2 holes. Kind of pinch the clamp with my left hand for the bottom, followed by this guy. Gotta line up the 2 bolts and then pop the middle. Last of all, negative terminal on the battery. One thing to keep an eye on when you're done with this job, start the car up, run it to normal operating temperature, and just double check those coolant lines that came off the throttle body. Old hoses tend to leak if you mess around with them, so just keep an eye on that, make sure you don't have any coolant leaks. And then other than that, you're good to go. Hope this video is helpful. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. We'll see you next time.